This is episode 4 of Art, Why I Stuck with a Junkie Jazzman. In episode 3, Art and I meet. I ended by saying that the relationship was being guided by Synanon's rules. Synanon had rules for everything, including sex. A couple wishing to get down, that's in quotes, had to first get approval from both their tribe leaders. They had to be of roughly the same Synanon age, and no one, quotes, younger than 3 months could play. I had 9 months. Art had 3. The couple had to endure a 30-day courtship during which mild petting was okay, but nothing further. By then, I had a good job teaching photography and a little chemistry and fractions along with it to myself and the kids in a perfectly equipped darkroom at the school. I was working in the school as people did who wished to bring their children in, though that, for me, was a lost cause already. My arrangements with Barrett, my ex, pretty much precluded it. Later, when I had to go to court in order to get the visitation rights Barrett and his new wife were illegally refusing me, I volunteered all my free time and did filing and typing in Synanon's legal offices. That earned me the use of one of Synanon's volunteer lawyers. I was, quotes, demonstrating good behavior. I was endeavoring, as the Synanon jargon had it, to seek and assume responsibility. I was a good girl now. That made me happy. I had a semi-private room in my dorm, had friends, was considered strength in games, more about those later. I liked being a mensch for the first time in my life, enjoyed the approbation of the community I lived in. I rebelled in little ways, wouldn't wear a bra. I was so thin and small back then I didn't need one, but I got hassled for my, quotes, hippie ways, and got chided in games for being moody. If I got on the Synanon bus in the morning, which conveyed us between our apartments inland and the main club on the beach, and the driver told me to smile, which happened now and then, I'd glower back and say, I am smiling. I did feel I'd stained my reputation by embracing Art, who was notoriously the most negative guy in the place, complaining, ridiculing, and snarling in the games where that was what you did, and out of them where you weren't supposed to. To counter this from him, to help him, I, quotes, ran him data all the time. I told him why I did the things Synanon suggested and why they made my life better. Even that didn't drive him away. Art was obsessive by nature. Deprived of music and drugs, he focused on me. I'd never been pursued like that before. I'd sharply discouraged fellows I didn't care for, and I'd been the pursuer of the ones I suddenly imagined were my fate, my absolute, if only I could make them recognize it. This situation was brand new. During our courtship, I was as strict as a 1950s virgin, maybe stricter about how far I went with Art when we made out. I was able to resist because he was so ardent. I almost had to pull away to balance things. But he was getting to me with his sweetness and sadness, his unembarrassed talk of love, telling me that I was it for him, what he'd been searching for, the great love come at last to save him. He confessed that he'd been stalking me. He'd gaze at me and tell me, awed, about the beauty of my eyes, my hair, my lips, my body, the way I moved and spoke, and his flattery, his fame, and his insightful and honest revelations about himself. The stories he told me from his life with bleak, wildly imaginative wit impressed me, the stories and the language he told them in. Art talked like an American. He didn't use my family's English, which was notably Jewish in that it came from books. Art was the people, the real thing. For a while before I dropped out of college, I'd been a folklore major, the only one at UC Berkeley where there was no folklore department. It was a self-created major. And I recognized the real American music when I heard it. He talked like my ex-stepfather, Dick Fraser, another American storyteller. And he had the same affection for slang and vernacular. Art talked like his father, a longshoreman, a wobbly. He talked like the guys he'd been in prison with, and of course, a little like a jazz musician, although he used to innocently wonder, doing the puzzled thing with his eyebrows, is it hip or hep now? Which one do they use? He disgustedly referred to the fellow who'd been chasing me as, quotes, that ugly, gangly rumpkin, hitting the G's, growling the R. I finally looked up rumpkin for this memoir. It's prison slang for a fool, a moron, a young, inexperienced person of low intelligence, which is funny because this admittedly tall, skinny guy was regarded as an intellectual. Years later, Art described me to myself as he first saw me, as I sat there, oblivious, across from him on the Synanon bus. Her hands were delicate, artistic hands. Her legs were beautifully shaped. She had little sandal kind of things on, and she had the cutest little feet, like little doll feet with cute little toes. I couldn't tell whether she was looking at me, but all of a sudden it seemed to me she opened her legs up a little bit, and I felt certain she was doing it on my behalf. I could see up underneath her dress. It was a very short dress, and I could see these purple little panties, and that really turned me on. By then, I didn't even bother to look away or try to be cool. I just devoured her with my eyes. The bus stopped, and I was trying to think of something to say, but she just got off the bus real quick, and she was gone. Usually I had no trouble talking to a woman. I would just talk to any of them and say anything. But with her, I couldn't seem to get anything out. I followed her. I saw the place that she went into, and I asked somebody who the girl was in the purple dress. They said, Lori Miller. That was it. I went back to my dorm, and I just kept thinking about Lori Miller and those panties. I said, Lori Miller, that's for me. I said, there's no question about it. I'm going to start a campaign starting tomorrow. I'm going to get her or else on my behalf. That phrase still gets me. This is how Art spoke to me right from the start. He got so personal. He shocked me, made me blush. He made me laugh. He flattered me, but so peculiarly. A girl gets used to lines, gets bored with them. Art wasn't glib. Instead, he seemed to offer me his famished, childish, lusting soul. I knew my own tendency to get obsessed by a man. I consciously began to practice a kind of anti-obsessive way of thinking about him. I'd been working at this discipline whenever thoughts of my daughter came, because they led me to a chasm too horrible, too deep to contemplate. Because I knew my thoughts would lead me there, I stopped them, blocked them, said no, even sometimes out loud. I went blank, went on to something else. Synanon believed in sublimation and repression, as opposed to acting out. When people who had hitherto never been ill suddenly developed rashes, nervous coughs, etc., approval was mildly expressed in some quarters. It was thought that the bad behavior we were now stifling leaked out instead as physical symptoms. Being sick was better than being out of control. During the time I was separated from my husband, and before I entered Synanon, free and suicidal, I never caught a cold or had a headache that wasn't caused by alcohol. Now, in Synanon, Miss Goody Two-Shoes had sinus infections and stomach problems. But at least I wasn't thinking about Maggie, how I'd abandoned her, how I'd lost her, and that there was now nothing I could do about any of it. I went to the doctor with my physical complaints, and I never, ever thought of ending my life. I used the same kind of mind control on myself regarding Art. When melting thoughts of him sprang up, I quashed them. And if I thought of him at all, even neutrally, I superimposed another face on my image of him. There was an ugly guy who looked a little like him. If I thought of that image and imagined that was Art, I could stay chilly in my thoughts. Because even though Art didn't have my style of looks, he was undeniably gorgeous. In Synanon, before we could have sex, we had to have some games together. Stay tuned for episode 5.